Hi, I'm Bill Lynn. I'm the Vice President of Heritage Arsenal. And today we have a group of items from the 1st Special Service Force, aka the Devil's Brigade, which was a very interesting unit that saw service during the Second World War. Devil's Brigade was formed in 1942 at Fort William Henry Harrison, a post near Helena, Montana. And it was uniquely composed of Canadians and Americans who had volunteered for parachute duty as well as ski training in this area of Montana. What the entire unit formed to do was actually to attack the heavy water plants in occupied Norway. By that point, the Germans had taken Norway, and those plants were actually fueling the German atomic project, which we were very sensitive towards and wanted to delay, if not completely eliminate, that capability. So the 1st Special Service Force was formed while they waited for Operation Plow to take route and actually to receive orders to be dedicated in that part of the world. They participated in the Aleutian Island campaign in Kiska, and in fact landed just on the heels the Japanese had evacuated only hours before. And so they occupied Kiska Island, returned to the United States, and then the demands of what was going on in Italy at that time prompted the unit to be redirected from its original purpose in Norway to North Africa, and then joining the units fighting in mainland Italy. They landed at Anzio. They participated in the combat parachute assault on the 14th, 15th of August, 1944, called Operation Dragoon in southern France. And then they were deactivated near Menton, France on the 5th of December. What we have here is a few items from a widow of one of those 1st Special Service Force members, Dora Stevens. What we have is a picture of Dora and her late husband, Anders Arsennek, who was killed in action at Anzio serving with the 1st Special Service Force. We have the parachute cord of red, white, and blue dyed parachute cord that was woven together, worn by all members of the unit. We have a Canadian parachute wings, which actually they took parachute training in Helena, received U.S. wings, but then later on when the unit was deactivated and those Canadians went back to the Canadian Army, they were allowed to wear their Canadian version of the parachute wings. The Kiska Task Force patch for the operation I just previously described. Here are the 2 unit patches, which one of them is actually Italian made with a very characteristic tight weave, but that actually is what inspired the current Green Berets within the United States Army's shoulder patch. As well, it was the 1st Special Service Force who first resurrected the crossed arrows and that are now worn by the U.S. Army Special Forces. So we received those from our lineage to the 1st Special Service Force, who actually resurrected them from the Indian Scouts of the Indian Wars era. This is a letter from Anders' parents in Canada to him, sending some propaganda that had features of Hitler, Tojo, and Mussolini on it. And this is kind of an interesting item, very popular in that time, a satin pillowcase, not so much now, but back then. But what's interesting about it is the motif here. It says United States and Canadian Forces parachute troops, so the airborne wings, and Fort Harrison, Montana. That could only be one unit. And what's interesting about this, we actually have the original mailer that accompanies this. So here is Anders Arsennek, killed in action, but at that time, writing to his wife in St. Catharines, Ontario. You have the custom stamp on here and the return address from him there in Helena training. So a fabulous little grouping to include the 1947 unit history of the unit, also quite rare. So a nice little grouping to a very, very rare organization that inspired the Special Forces of today in the United States Army. And really, we remember 75 years hence the sacrifice and service of Canadian brothers who fought side by side with Americans in combat in the historic and storied Devil's Brigade.